The dead landscape. I squint my eyes from the sudden brightness of the sun as the clouds float away from the sun's view. The sky was so dull and lifeless. Even if the sun shines brightly, only the corpse vultures circle around my area. It was explanatory. There was meat and blood everywhere. Carcasses of all sorts of creatures lie around the rocky floor of the dried up canyon. They look so weird to our eyes. The smell was excruciatingly horrible. I wondered why I even decided to explore this area. I got bored. This place had little fun in it, and we are apparently cursed to live in this place. The land wasn't hard to survive in, actually, but it's something else that drives us mad. Maybe it's the corpses, or the seemingly dead landscape. Who knows? The canyon was extremely tall and looked endless. The water dried out long ago, so I don't have to worry about those aquatic animals again. It was definitely a long walk, a long, boring walk, until something caught my eye. Elaborate paintings were drawn on the side of a fairly large rock. It looked very strange, very strange. Carefully painted streaks and lines were placed in certain ways, connecting to some and to none. All those streaks were drawn horizontally on the rock. I stared at it for a long time as I drown in my own curiosity. I wonder what they mean. I reached my limb and placed a digit on the surface. Oh, what curious drawings. Those creatures must have made it. Speaking of those creatures, we never made a official name for them. Did they make a name for us? Anyway, I always grew fond of them each time I saw one. The rock was practically calling me to grab it. I couldn't resist. I lifted the rock up and carried it as I walked around the canyon floor. Surprisingly, it wasn't very heavy. I continued trekking as I walked around carcasses laying on the ground. The sky grew dark and the moonlight illuminated the sky as well as the stars. I could see still. I dragged the rock with my path. Then suddenly something caught my foot and I tripped. My body planted on the sandy grey dirt. I quickly recovered and scanned my surroundings. An object did the deed. It was very shiny. It glittered under the moonlight. The bottom half was firmly buried in the ground. It took tremendous effort for me to finally pull it out. Why I do these things? I'm a very curious one, that's why. Unlike my fellows, it was a unique shaped glass bottle. I hit the gold mine that would feed my curiosity, didn't I? Afterwards, I found once again another object, a golden ring. You don't find a lot of these in this land, you know. I fitted it on one of my digits and carried on, but instead I turned back and walked towards where my group should be located in. The weight of the rock was bearable. I felt tired. I struggled to keep my eyes open. Who knows, a beast could find me in the darkness, which, by the way, happened before, and it wasn't pleasant. Surely that wouldn't happen right now, right? The time flew by and I noticed I spoke too soon. An echoing howl ripped out of a beast's mouth. Following that, more howls were made by separate beasts. I swiveled my head in panic. I placed a rock and the bottle near me. I crept to the nearest bony carcass and took out the sharpest and sturdiest bone. The darkness was getting darker and darker by the minute. I heard steps and growls near me. The glowing eyes stared at me. I stood still. I got a look at the beast and identified it as a bone wolf. I learned by one's experience that they get easily confused if you stay still. But then I heard rustling in the area. It wasn't one of the wolves. A deer happened to walk by unknowingly. The wolves were glad and rushed to kill the prey. There was no chance of survival for that deer. They quickly, in a flash, geared the deer's meat off in chunks. Blood dripped and cracking bones from the bones snapping were heard. The deer struggled, but soon died. Organs spilled out of the dead body of the deer. The wolves began to feast. I'm always confused why no carnivorous beasts ever eat one of the lying carcasses that appear continually like a nightmare. It is an easier food source. It's not like all of the meat are rotten or anything. Even we eat the good ones. I ran with my found objects as fast as my legs would carry me and jumped out of the way. Soon after, I was far away from those animals, yet close to the group. In the distance, I could hear faint laughing. I see that they constructed a bonfire. Smell of roasted meat was faint, but it helped me get going. I was starving. I was so happy my group prepared this. I ran and approached my group. Some greeted me cheerfully, but lazily, as if they were drugged. I sat down near the burning fire. A friend of mine gave me a raw piece of meat. I thanked him and cooked it. The smell made my mouth water. The cooking process was done, and I chomped on the juicy meat. Simply delicious. The tents were fine, and the site was cleared. Everything was finally comfortable. My legs ached from the walk in and out of the canyon. Then I remembered the objects that I found. The rock and the bottle was resting on the ground alone. My ring was still on my digit. I lifted myself up and grabbed the two objects. I turned my body facing the rest of my fellows. Their eyes went wide and some even asked me what they were. The lack of knowledge of some of them were annoying, but I tried to explain to them anyways. I noticed that this is the first time my fellows actually showed interest in something other than food, board games, or something else related to that. Well, not all of them. Some just glanced at it and yawned. I sighed heavily. It's as if they never saw such things before. I must have really found something good. I passed the objects around the bonfire. I leaned against a boulder and grabbed another piece of meat. The fire continued to burn and the rest of the group, including me, fell asleep. My eyelids didn't protest. Now a peaceful slumber was made. The next early morning I was awoken by my friend shaking my shoulder roughly. A look of horror spread across his face. I couldn't see the others. He led me to an area. There in that area, The remaining group was seen, surrounding in a circle. My face morphed into a very frightened expression. I was so used to seeing another creature's corpse, but never my own kind's. It made me rethink a lot. I wanted to vomit. This was also the reaction I made when I first started to live on this landscape. I admit it did take a toll. The dead body was sprawled across the dirt in a horrifying fashion. A slash was made on the poor guy's throat. A Glasgow mark was carved sickeningly. The eyes stared upwards with a frightening stare. Blood splatters were red and fresh. The body had a distinctive odour which I could identify. It was on the tip of my tongue. One of the group members started sobbing. Others started investigating. I was wondering why my group all of a sudden started to show more interest and curiosity. But for now, the better question is, who did this? It surely wasn't a type of beast. What type of beast would do such attacks like this? Also, there was no report of a beast on an eyewitness. One witness said it was a figure with 2 hind legs. We walk in hind legs, and so do many sentient creatures in this landscape, including those creatures. Could it be one of us? Or one from another group? My friend gave me a glance that I knew it meant to take action. "What do we do?" he asked in a whisper. I stared blankly, like I was drowning in my own thoughts. But then I felt that spark of energy, the energy I felt before as I made my decision of exploring that one massive canyon, my very own spark that keeps fueling the motivational fire in my heart. I leaped out and pushed away the crowd in front of me. It took me a lot of emotional strength. I couldn't just sit down now. I was standing right in front of the corpse. No one around me dared to step any closer. They watched and murmured like the murder of crows. And I spotted something under the arm of the victim. A white thin sheet. I couldn't identify the material at all. No matter how much I tried, the sheet still felt so foreign, but familiar. I carefully turned the sheet of the thin pale material, and there it was. On the other side were streaks and lines matched together horizontally, like the ones I found on that rock. I made a quick, inaudible gasp. I lightly clutched my forehead. My head pounded. I knew I was missing something. It was as if I couldn't remember at all. The darkness of the forest. As the twilight soon loomed over the quaint forest, one could hear the birds chirping to their fledglings. The forest is usually quiet, but there was an overwhelming sense of ominous existence within the area that day. Smoke could be seen miles away from hikers who decided to spend the weekend camping within this dwelling of life. A man and a woman, both in wedlock and overcome with anticipation for the days to come. They originally planned to reside within the forest for about 3 days, but depending on how they felt, they might even stay longer. The twilight began to envelop the forest in shadows, brooding over the couple. The couple began to set up for the night in a little clearing, with a small stream within walking distance of the area. After they set up their tents, they went ahead and laid up in their sleeping bags, kissing each other good night. The birds had stopped their chirping and nestled up to their fledglings for the night. The fire the couple had set up brightened the campsite, illuminating it and casting hazy shadows in the background. A stiff breeze blew through the forest, shaking leaves to the ground. The couple had both woken up at the same time to a noise that sounded like an engine. Then, almost out of nowhere, the couple could hear a loud and distant explosion which rocked the forest. The couple hurriedly exited their tents to see what had happened, to be met with a surprising scene taking place. A stupendous fire engulfed the forest, radiating with a massive amount of heat. The couple stood there in a daze, stunned by the events unfolding right before their eyes. Grabbing his wife's hand, both the man and the woman ran out of the forest, away from the flame that seemingly never ended. They ran and ran, knocking branches out of their way and darting around the trees. After what felt like hours, the couple found themselves at a ledge which looked out across a river of humongous size. They stopped and caught their breath, gasping for air. After they regained their energy, they turned back around to find nothing but an empty blackness. No trees, no ground, no fire, no blazing heat. Nothing but pure blackness. The couple then turned back around to the ledge to see that nothing was there either except blackness. Everything had vanished completely. Looking at her husband, the wife began to scream. The man held tight onto her, trying to calm both her and him down. She began to cry, her tears dropping onto her sweat-soaked shirt. He held onto her even tighter and told her to just pray. After the woman had stopped crying, she nodded and calmed her breath. Closing her eyes, both her and the husband began to pray. They prayed for help. They prayed for light. They prayed for someone to bring them out of this nightmare. Their prayers were absorbed by the darkness. As the couple's desperation grew, so did their wariness. What would happen to them? They both wondered. They fell to the ground, weakened by their surroundings. The wife held tightly onto her husband, hoping something would let up, but it felt like decades before anything happened. A loud roar of what sounded like some sort of machine began to devour their surroundings. The man, who had fell sideways onto the blackness of the ground, began to bleed through his nose, then through the pores of his skin, leaving behind a sharp pain throughout his entire body. Looking upwards, the man caught a glance of tiny ashes falling to the non-existent ground. The woman began to feel an itch on her stomach. She began to scratch at it until it began to grow into a painful twitch. Looking at her stomach in the darkness, she saw odd bulges moving around in her skin. Then, with a bloody burst of pressure, a black, ovular creature began to dig out of her stomach, spewing stomach acid and blood all over the woman's clothes. She screamed in pain, for the creature was very long, with razor-sharp feet sticking into her skin to pull itself out of her. The creature had finally escaped, leaving the woman behind in a bloody mess, leaving her internal organs askew in the never-ending darkness. And that's it for tonight, my little hellhounds. Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed tonight's scary stories, then don't forget to click the like button and subscribe. If you have any scary stories you want narrated on the channel, then submit them to Reddit r/homeofscares and follow me on Twitter at homeofscares. Now, good night, my little hellhounds.